New generation of Ghanaians and few surviving contemporaries. This is the poignant moment you will not want to miss. An important segment of national political evolution. We present to you one of the towering figures of Akuapem State. He paid his dues to family, nation, career, and humanity. Mr. Ernest Arko, former senior police officer who passed on 16th January 2021, 3 weeks short of his 98th birthday. Born into the Teko family of Akuapem, Mr. Ernest Arko was appointed to the high office of Inspector General of Police, IGP, on 30th September 1974 and exited the service on 17th July 1978. He doubled as the Commissioner for the Interior, the ministerial title used by the Supreme Military Council SMC1 government headed by General Ignatius Kutu Echampong. Then a colonel of the Ghana Army, Echampong led the military coup that deposed Prime Minister Buzier's government in 1972, truncating the Second Republic of Ghana. It is important to note that former IGP Ernest Arko was elevated to that position 2 years after the military takeover. His predecessor, Mr. J.H. Kobna, straddled the previous civilian administration of Prime Minister Dr. Buzier and the succeeding junta led by General Echampong. Mr. J.H. Kobna too had held both IGP and Interior Minister jobs at the same time, and the man who picked the baton from him also slid into dual roles on basis of hair apparency and seniority. The double portfolios of IGP and Minister of the Interior as badges on one person appeared to be the routine of the 1960s and 70s. Straight away, persons born in the 1970s would not have known the live throttles of Mr. Ernest Arko. Similarly, persons born in the decade before the 70s will have been too young to decipher who Mr. Arko was at the time. That is why a historical survey, such as the attempt made in this one, will save the day. It is important to focus on this work, using it as the imagery for the nucleus of the activities within police and internal security during the Echampong's rule. Mr. Ernest Arko was on brink of retiring at police mandatory age of 55 in 1978 when General Fred Akufu overthrew the government in a palace coup. Mr. Arko's tenure as an IGP survived the new political climate until he gloriously retired from the police service and was replaced by Mr. Benjamin Samuel Kofi Kwache as the IGP. General Fred Akufu had just 1 year stint in office on the basis of a seismic coup led by the military's junior officers in 1979. Christened a revolution, it came with a house-cleaning exercise targeting senior officers at helm of affairs before 1979. Junior officers pitted themselves against their superiors, and the fast-paced developments saw the summary executions by firing squad, 3 former heads of state. They were Generals Echampong, Akufu, and Akwesi Frifa. Some service commanders suffered same fate. The tempestuous period forced into exile a good number of senior officers possibly targeted by the 1979 regime. Former Inspector General of Police, Mr. Ernest Arko, sought refuge in the Republic of Togo, Ghana's eastern neighbor, with which she shares a common land border. As the Minister of the Interior in the year just gone by, Mr. Ernest Arko's personality was not likely to be lost on security operatives, not in the least the border guards within Ghana's territory. But somehow, Mr. Ernest Arko managed to cross the border into Togo, which was to open a whole new chapter of his life. General Joseph Nunu Mensah, in his reflections on the events that shaped the 1970s, particularly the 1979 coup, knows that if order had prevailed in the momentary mayhem that gripped the country, some senior officers at the time accused of corruption and nepotism could have saved their skins had they had the chance to defend themselves.
If those who were killed had the opportunity of being questioned why was, they would have killed themselves because they were not corrupt. But they died so that those corrupt ones who are around had their day. If Akufu had a chance I had, if Bwachi had had a chance I had, they would have been cleared. Maybe God, I don't know, maybe God loves me so much, I don't know. If I had done it, and I didn't answer, today I won't be sitting down here.
Mr. Ernest Arko belongs to the exclusive club of Ghanaian public officers who became Inspector Generals of Police and held the Interior Ministerial portfolio concurrently. He is described by those who knew him as a man who cut his teeth in all his endeavors and contributed immensely to the positive developments or evolvement of the Ghana Police Service. It is confirmed that he acquired for the police the present police hospital building at Cantonments in Accra. 90-year-old Madame Margaret Dakwa, who retired on the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police, ACP, was a constable when Mr. Ernest Arko was a superintendent.
Today, our policemen and women are modern generation, and so they didn't have the archaic thought of obedience which we had for our parents before eventually even enlisting in the police. The modern generation don't have. So you see the policeman standing out there and stopping for a car, taking money, broad daylight in the car. That is the modern one. But during that time, and Mr. Arko in particular had been in the MTU for years, and MTU was slated for this collection money from getting money from them, and he helped got rid of that image. So I think that's a lot he did for the police. The armored cars, it was through him that we had. Of course, we have said about the police hospital. There are a lot of things. When we were transferred to him when he was the district officer in Central Police Station, Accra, that was the first time women went there. And they were building this big barracks. We were in the rented quarters. They came and nothing in hot time, so they rained stones on our building. And Mr. Arko had to stand and make sure that the first block that was being built was completed within a matter of time for the police women to move in. He is the go-getter. If there's something he knows the police will have, then they will have.
She says Mr. Ernest Arko sought to reform the police service, first by improving the uniforms worn by personnel. She also said Mr. Ernest Arko also introduced the Police Armored Squadron. Without a doubt, one of the prominent personalities in whose memoirs Mr. Ernest Arko is a centerpiece is Mr. Joseph Bwachi Appiah, who retired as the Commissioner of Police. Mr. Bwachi Appiah belonged to the graduating class of Police Cadet Course 16, which passed out in 1977. As a high-flying officer and one of the top cadets, and later the ADC to IGP Ernest Arko, he became well acquainted with and was very much trusted by his boss.
Having retired from the service, then Ernest and his men were looking for him, and he had to flee. Because at that time, whether you have a good case or not, you don't know what will happen to you. So it will be better to run away to safeguard your life. So this is what prompted him to move out of the country. It was during his period that the Ghana Police Service was changed to Ghana Police Force through his instrumentality. And it was during his service as IGP that the Armored Car Squadron, which is now called Form Police, was retooled with armored cars. And a lot of service vehicles were purchased for the Ghana Police Service. So he did a lot for the police. And it was that period that he also acquired the Ghana Police Hospital through the instrumentality of the government of the day to negotiate with Boachi Matres to purchase the hospital for us. So the police hospital was acquired through the effort of Mr. Arko.
If you hear his accounts on the 1979 coup and how it affected superior police officers from the rank of Assistant Superintendent of Police upwards, you probably would agree with the school of thought that believed that going into exile was the safest bet for persons deemed to have been targeted in their pricing. Behind the curtain of the IGP and Commissioner for the Interior, he said Mr. Arko loved sports.
You know, Mr. Arko was a very good tennis player. So sporting activities, you know, police and military, we are very good in sporting activities. But these days, these sporting activities are not going on well, are not going on at all. So they should try to revive the SESA games, the security games, so that it will, you know, bring out more athletes who will bring honors to the nation. The escorts were formerly wearing the fez, but he changed that one to cap that the general police were wearing. So the escort and the GPs were wearing the same type of uniform. He brought that. And he bought a lot of vehicles for the Ghana Police Service. Because before his appointment, the police had very few vehicles. And it was through his instrumentality that we had those vehicles from Mechanical Lloyd.
Mr. Patrick Kwatin Echampong, who was appointed to the post in March 2005 by President John Ejekum Kufuor and retired in 2009, also became an ADC to Mr. Ernest Arko. He graduated in Police Course 15 in 1976.
There was a big National Police Parade at the parade grounds at Tessan Police Depot. And since we were then passing out Course 15, we were part of that parade. And Mr. Arko was the IGP and General Champong was the reviewing officer. I was incidentally the best cadet officer, so I received a Sword of Honor. And the parade was so well organized. Every one of our units put on some kind of display which the public had not seen before, from the mounted squadron to the motor riders to the unarmed combat groups, judo and things, to the armored squadron. Very beautiful parade, very well organized. And since then we haven't had anything of that magnitude again.
He continued his story, recalling an extraordinary thing Mr. Arko did in his life.
Mr. Arko happened to come to the office where we are. And he said, "Young man, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine, sir." He said, "How do you come to work?" I said, "I'm living with a friend, so my landlord gives me a lift. Sometimes I take a taxi." He stood for a moment and then he asked his secretary, "What about the last batch of vehicles?" And I must explain that in those days, it wasn't like now when you walk into any car showroom and buy any car that you like. I think because of the foreign exchange constraints, so the state used to import vehicles, mostly from Japan Motors and Auto Parts. So mostly they were Datsun men in some vehicles. And then they'll give some out to organizations to sell to their officers. So he was told that there were 4, 3 had been given out. One was left. He said, "Give it to the young man." So I was given a cheat to go to Japan Motors and take a brand new 120 wire Datsun car for with insurance and everything. I think it was about 250 cedis. So that was the first time in my life that I ever owned a brand new vehicle of my own.
Mr. Patrick Quartier Champon said that despite the readjustments with time, the police service appeared to be well coordinated with the combination of interior ministerial post and the IGP in one man.
IGP, and because of starting from Mr. Kobna, National Redemption Council and the General Champion, and then it became the Supreme Military Council. So he was IGP, the Minister for the Interior, Chairman of the Police Council, and then a member of the NRC and Supreme Military Council. I'm sure it made things a little bit easier.
The three officers in this piece described Mr. Ernest as a man who was kind and disciplined.
He was worried about the state of our attire. A lot of the men and women were not properly attired, and things like police notebook, stationery, the public was complaining about. If you go to a station, you have to bring your own pen and things like that. So I should take an interest in those things. And so if you remember, during that time, we had lots of uniforms for different things. For the regular office work, for the parades, for the special operations, for UN operations, and the women too had the different types of uniforms. So I did that for his memory and to cherish his memory. So he's a man that I love, and I think he loved me. He took a personal liking to me. And one thing I'm sure if you talk to any officer who knew him, will tell you that he was very, very, very meticulous about his appearance. You know, you see some officers, maybe the cap is not at the correct place, the gorgets are not, well, no. The old man was very meticulous about all the belts in tie, whether in uniform or in civilian attire. Mina will tell you the belts in the correct places, the caps or whatever it is, the tie properly worn and looking resplendent. That's one thing I remember about him.
Since he left office in 1978 as the Commissioner for the Interior, subsequent to him, there have been several other such appointees to that ministry, evidence of which are the portraits affixed on a government building showing those that have held that helm. Mr. Arko can be spotted in the first third on this timeline. 2 months prior to assumption of the dual positions, Ghana had made a switch from the left-hand drive to the right-hand drive, popularly called Nifa Nifa at the time. That historic event, which panned as a process until it took a foothold, was sanctioned by the authorities on the 14th of August, 1974.
He played a leading role in that regard, from driving from the left to the right, because as an IGP and as Minister for Interior, then as Commissioner for Interior, he was responsible for that project, that Nifa project. He was responsible for it. So police officers were trained so that after the moving from the left to the right, they will be able to monitor the drivers and see what force will be coming out of it for future correction. And so he did a lot.
While still holding the position of Commissioner of Police Administration, he and Brigadier F.W.K. Akufu, as he then was, were tasked by the then head of state and chairman of the NRC to carry out the work of conversion. Just prior to becoming the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Ernest was in full flight, instructing all internal security operatives to supervise and ensure a smooth, seamless new beginning in the road transport sector. The switch was in response to the inherent challenges within left-hand drive, monitored over a long period of time, and with with a follow-up decision to change that trend. Despite the variations made to it over time, the institution of Ghana's Highway Code in 1974 served as foundation for reconditioning motorists and other road users on the new dispensation of right-hand drive. It was in Mr. Arko's time in office that the police force reverted to its original designation from the colonial legacy. The Gold Coast Constabulary was a force, but both Osajefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Prime Minister Kofi Buzia had different ideas and ideals. They changed its name from a force to a service during the First Republic under Nkrumah to a force under IGP J.W.K. Hale with the National Liberation Council government, only to be adjusted by the Constituent Assembly, which gave the name change to service again, so that the police institution is not considered a bully, but a partner to civilians. General Champon's government enabled the last use of the title Ghana Police Force. Former Ghanaian military ruler General I.K. Champon pictured here in 1977 in dance steps with his wife Faustina at the ball which followed an Interpol event in Ghana. It was reported in the volume 1 of Ghana Police News. The photo was taken by a constable called A.F. Boateng. Ghana first hosted, incidentally, the year she joined Interpol in 1958. In 1977, Ghana hosted another international conference under auspices of Carl Persson of Sweden, the then president of Interpol, and under the patronage of the young monarch of Sweden, King Carl Gustaf. Mr. Arko voluntarily left Ghana in the wake of the military takeover, and he escaped to Togo for sanctuary before relocating to London in the United Kingdom. Over there was a new horizon in sight. Given his age and experience in public life, former IGP Mr. Ernest Arko was conferred with the title Head of the Impoti family of Equiapem citizens living in the United Kingdom and elsewhere overseas. Mr. Arko is spotted here gracing family and citizens in diaspora events, effectively a new chapter of post-1979. Nana Ejiri Kumi was one of his nephews who lived and met Mr. Ernest Arko in London.
I met Papa Arko, as we affectionately call him, in UK in 1999, February 1999. Papa usually called me Kwesi Ejiri. We usually meet in his house once every month without fail. Whenever we meet, he played wonderful melodies on his piano, and we sang Presbyterian hymns for our devotional prayers before the meeting commenced. And you can just imagine how the Spirit will charge. And indeed, he was a very, very good pianist. He does it at home, at his own leisure, at his own time. He will never ever get bored. This particular meeting gave us the opportunity to get together for a party after meeting, which usually hosted by his wonderful wife, Auntie Grace. We were privileged for Papa Arko to educate us about the history of the Impoti royal family from Adesu to Chiwire to Tutuano to Jemfiase and to Ekropon Equiapem, where we had our title Impoti Kantamanto of Ekropon Equiapem. We originated from Santiko Bufu, a village called Metasi in the Ashanti region.
Wife of Nana Ejiri Kumi, Rosemary, also shared fond memories about Mr. Ernest Arko.
Very generous, very sociable, a father, nothing was too big and nothing was too small for him. It was always nice to be around him. He carried such an aura around him which actually beckons people to him, and a lot of testimonies about when people come looking for help. He never turned anybody away. He always helped. And we had the privilege of associating with him very closely.
Mr. Ernest Arko was a devout Christian. With God at the center of his life, he found in his wife a pillar to give him the needed support. She coordinated all activities to ensure that his life in political exile was a pleasant one. Mr. Ernest Arko and Mrs. Grace Arko were married for 66 years from 21st May 1955, only separated by the death of Mr. Ernest Arko. Mrs. Grace Arko is a shining example of the maxim behind every successful man is a woman. She really helped Mr. Arko to swim the high tides that came his way. The family tree is now a huge one, as their children are also mothers and fathers. Here are some children of the couple.
Being closer to nature was what really attracted him. And he was sort of torn between being close to back home and between that and his children and his grandchildren, because we were all here. So that sort of created a sort of a push and pull. The push to go back home and the pull of the children and grandchildren.
When he was IGP then, he was also always very busy. And we are talking about how we got the time to really bond after he came to London, and I mean, he was with us all the time and with the grandchildren and everything. But it's interesting, about 4:30 this morning when I woke up, I mean, I've been doing that a lot lately. I mean, I just wake up and I keep thinking about my dad. And this just popped into my head. I remember when I went to Form 1, I mean, close to the speech day, I suddenly realized I didn't have any jewelry on me. We were supposed to wear kente and a white top. And I was thinking, I mean, everybody was talking about what jewelry they were going to wear. I can't remember how I contacted him, because there were certainly no mobile phones then. But somehow I was able to contact him. I think we used to go to the office in the school to make calls or something, but I told him I really needed jewelry. And I'm thinking now that he was so busy then, but he came to the school one lunchtime. He just came. I was just worrying that on the day I have no jewelry to wear. And there he was at lunchtime. They just called me from the dining hall that my dad was looking for me. And everybody was thinking, oh, the IGP was in the school. But it's interesting. Thinking about it now, it was no big deal to me, I guess, because he was my father then. But people were like, oh, the IGP's in the school, the IGP's in the school. But that was my father. I mean, it was just my father who'd come to see me. And he brought me my jewelry. I remember it was a gold earring and necklace set. And I was so excited. But thinking about it now, he was very busy, but he still found the time to bring it to me. He found the time to bring it to me. And I think about things like that, things that you take for granted. But I mean, when you don't have it anymore, we will miss him. Papa, we miss you, we miss you, we miss you. And we love you. And we love you.
I did talk about his life in Togo because for some reason I didn't talk about his life in the UK. But yeah, certainly. I think we need to also acknowledge the contribution that were made by some of his friends, like Boachi Matres, Mr. Boachi of Boachi Matres fame, and also Henry Jaba. They spoke to him very regularly, and I think they also served to enhance his social life in this country. So I think it's worth mentioning that he had, he could call on any of those two, and they also called on him quite a lot. And I think it made life here much easier. You know how tough it is when you go somewhere and you don't know anyone at all, or you don't know people from your own country. It's nice to have people from your own country in the mix. He did have friends, other friends who were probably European and stuff, and others that who we don't need to mention. But yes, certainly the contribution of Mr. Boachi and Mr. Jaba, who are now deceased ahead of him, also made life for him very comfortable. He also spent, he chose up the period when he first arrived to either polish up on his piano playing or learning to play the piano, because by the time we came, he was so perfect. So playing the piano, he used to like playing the piano quite a lot whilst he was in St. John's Wood, and as well as embarking. Auntie used to joke that he would listen to the news on the television, try all the channels to see where the news was, and when he could find nothing, he would just go and drown whatever program she wanted to watch, drown out whatever program she wanted by playing the piano. And that's something that I think we should also mention. Okay, everything else that I forgot about has been spoken about by Uncle Kwame.
Papa, Deye, we will miss you a lot and love you more. I've gotten to say it last. I'm saying it because you're always saying it to me. Love you more. But I'm saying it now. Love you more. And I know you're looking down on us. Love you and really, really miss you. Papako, Deye.
One more thing to add, because we all know Papa never saw us as adults, he also saw us as children. But my favorite memory of Papa was the one time he saw me as an adult. So that's when I went to see him at Lome. I was just turned 18, and he opened a bottle of beer and offered me one. Papa never offered me alcohol before. That is my favorite memory of Papa.
Papa, I will always be proud of you, and I will always miss you.
In the last few months, I've been at my worst, and I've always felt the way I feel, or when I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, the first person I think of is, let me call Papa and talk to him. Then all of a sudden I realize that no, on this occasion I can't call Papa. We miss you so much, but we know we shall see you again. Rest in peace. Yedawasi.
Papa, nanti wiye, una nyamena, ibeshie bio.
Papa, last thing I make a joke say, Yedawasi. Yedawasi say, "Wo ye nyama bebree imbro so my in Yedawasi bebree." The me say me kind what the
off guard with that one. My lasting remembrance of my father and advice that he gave us was always to believe in ourselves in whatever we do. Always have faith. And I remember one thing that he used to say, no matter to wait, it's the eggs of a pigeon. No matter where you put it, if it's going to, do you know what you call the young of a pigeon? Well, if the eggs are going to hatch, they will hatch. In effect.
Yeah.
So if you strive and do well for yourself, no matter whatever hardships that you go through, it will it will bear fruits if it's meant to be. So all in effect, do your possible best. And if you do your possible best, it will yield fruit. It also reminds me of the arguments him and I used to have. Nothing serious. We just like to have our banters. We argue about everything, and at the end of the day, we smoke the peace pipe by him bringing out one of his finest whiskeys. We'll sit down and reminisce over what we have argued over, and then we'll see. I'll notice that whatever my arguments had been was fruitless, and it taught me a very big lesson that I should do a lot more listening than talking. And that's one of the memories I always take with me from him. That I should be doing a lot more listening than talking.
It's a really good lesson too.
We now turn attention to grandchildren of Mr. Ernest Arko. All grannies in the Zoom dashboard spoke from across either the Atlantic or the Mediterranean. It is interesting to note that the old man had time for each and every one per the tributes they gave.
My name is Napoleon Atukito. I'm with Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. I sometimes report in the news bulletin, and I'm very glad to have all of you here. We have gathered here not because of two good news. Our respected former IGP and Minister of Interior has left us in the cold, but we are still putting ourselves together. Yes,
Hi.
Philip, I would like to interact with you briefly about Mr. Arko, your grandfather. And to kick the ball or to kickstart, let me ask you, what kind of person was Grandpa during his career? I mean, if you are intimate with Grandpa, how do you find Grandpa? How did you find Grandpa? And how did you see him as a person?
Grandpa was a very strong, proud man. Someone who was always willing to impart some knowledge when you went to speak with him. So I was very lucky that we lived not too far from his house. So every Saturday or Sunday we would go and visit, and he would ask us lots of questions, but then in the conversation there would always be a lesson. And I think everybody here can agree that whether it was something casual, a very casual, light-hearted conversation, he would always have a little anecdote to tell people. And he was a man who saw a lot and did a lot, and he always wanted to share that with his grandchildren. So he was very proud of his heritage and who he was, and he was very proud of us as well, so wanted to give us as much encouragement and advice as possible.
If I cry, you excuse me. Yeah, we were all quite close to Grandpa. I was very close to him. He was growing up. We all know in time he's gonna pass, but you never really want it to happen. I wasn't ready for it, to be frank. He was strong. He was strong, and as much as he was 97, we all trusted he was going to have a good few more years to go. So literally when I found out, it took my breath away, and I literally was thinking I couldn't breathe for a couple of seconds, quite honestly. But we are grateful at the same time because we've been blessed with many, many, many years with him.
I know fractions of the story. It's difficult to, because it's such an emotive subject, I guess it's difficult to get the full details from everyone, because the people who can tell the story, such as Grandpa and his children, they lived it. So it's not the easiest subject to talk about. But as I said, I do know the basis of what happened, and I'm just grateful, of course, that Grandpa, Granddad survived, my parents survived, his children. So it's a horrific story, but I'm just grateful that Granddad's alive to tell it, and we're not in a situation where we're having to learn about Granddad, unfortunately not making it out.
He had Ghana News on all the time, on the radio. So Ghana News would be on the radio, English news would be on the TV, and you wonder which one he's listening to, and you'll be listening to one, and you think he's listening to the other, and he'll give you a conversation, ask you a question. Oh, what do you think about that? And you're like, oh, I thought you were listening to the radio. And he goes, no, I'm listening to the radio and the TV. And then you'll be listening to the radio, and he goes, oh, what do you think about? And you're like, oh, I thought you were listening to the TV. He goes, no. So he was always taking knowledge in, always passing his knowledge on, and always wanted to know what you thought about the situation as well.
One thing, I never said it to his face or anything like that, but I always used to call him Mr. Ghana, because it's like tradition, history, everything about Ghana, like Nana said earlier. You go to his house, he would have in addition to the kind of radio on, he'd have his computer on as well, and Ghana Web will be on as well. So he'd be like, oh, come and read this document, or come and read that document. So you could tell how much he loved Ghana. So the kind of words that I always associate with Grandpa is love. So it's a case of he loved his family, he loved his country, and you could see how proud he was of his upbringing and of his family as well. So it's a case of he wanted us to know the history, he wanted us to know where he came from, and like one of the things that one of the things he showed me was his retirement letter.
He was just like, he supported all of us in every one of our endeavors. Like I'm an entertainer, and he used to always ask me about what theatre stuff I do and stuff like that. I'm currently in Ohio because that's where I met my missus on a cruise ship, and yeah, he never put any pressure on any of us to do what he wanted us to do. He wanted us to do what we wanted to do and be the best at it. So I didn't feel like he wanted us to do what he did, and I'm just grateful that he was always encouraging, always dropping little dimes of knowledge.
I remember when I first told him that I wanted to go into advertising, because that's the industry that I'm in now, and he said it's useless. And we spent the next going back and forth on how my job is actually important and how it actually relates to everything that he also cares about as well. And it was interesting because as much as he started with that statement, at the end of the day, he was just like, if that's what you want to do, and I know in Ghana it can be complicated to go on that path, but if that's something that you believe in, then that's all that matters. And you shouldn't care about what anyone else thinks, including him. So although he had that opinion, he still basically gave me the thumbs up to go ahead with what I wanted to do.
Got his flowers while he was still alive, and people did recognize what he did for Ghana. A few weeks back, I actually went back into my emails and tried to find my personal statement when I applied to university. So I applied to politics, and Grandpa was more of my inspirations as to why. And in it, I kind of put like, my grandfather was the head of the police in Ghana before a military coup forced him out to flee the country to escape execution. The story of how he refused to degrade his democratic integrity inspired me to follow his political footsteps and made me believe strongly in the need for democracy, as that's what he wanted and what he fought for.
For me, represented love. He represented laughter. He represented joy. Like when I went around, like I felt very comfortable. I felt I was at home. I didn't have to watch how I carried myself, because I think he taught all of us how to like carry ourselves and be respectable human beings, and also respect our elders. Like he invested a lot of time like teaching us about our culture, our heritage, and just even in conversations, like even speaking true with us, even if we weren't that fluent, and just teaching us all these little things that I think have made us who we are today. And I think we turned out all right, all of us. So
Mr. Ernest Arko found the political silver lining in the democratic rule which accompanied the Fourth Republic, and he made his first return visit to Ghana in 2005. It was a rather quiet entry to Ghana, though he later granted an interview to the Chronicle newspaper of Ghana. Mr. Arko belonged to the special stock who are natives of Ekropon Ekuapem in the eastern region of Ghana. Ekropon means the large town, and so it is in the Ekuapem area. The place cannot be divorced from facts in history which authoritatively states that it is the genesis of modern education in the then Gold Coast, now Ghana. One Philip Kakwe is reported to have begun the first school at Cape Coast at his home in 1726, which became the foundations of first elementary school in Ghana. Yet, it was in 1848 that the Gold Coast experienced an academic institution of higher learning at Ekropon Ekuapem. It was the Basel Missions Initiative, setting up a training college there for catechism. This was a first in the Gold Coast, but second in West Africa, as Sierra Leone had the Fura Bay College by 1827. Both institutions had undergrowths in terms of rudimentary schools that grounded those who had early education there in good morals and solid education. Among notable alumni of Ukropong Ekuapem Presbyterian Training College were the first Speaker of Ghana's Parliament, Barrister Emmanuel Charles Quist, renowned composer and ethnomusicologist Professor J.H. Kwabena Nketia, the President of the Second Republic of Ghana and former Chief Justice, Justice Edward Akufo-Addo, and another eminent jurist who was Speaker of Parliament in the Second Republic and acted as President of Ghana in August 1970, Justice Ni Ama Olenu. Ukropong Ekuapem is the only town in Ghana to have produced 3 Ghanaian heads of state, being Edward Akufo-Addo, General Fred Akufu, and Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, son of President of the Second Republic. Messrs. Ernest Arko and David Asante Apietu are sons of the land who became Inspector Generals of Police. Their names are inscribed on a plaque unveiled at Ukropong Ekuapem by President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Lights were shown on Mr. Ernest Arko, even in twilight of his life, by the Ukropong Presbyterian Church for his deeds and distinguished career that had brought honor to the Ekuapem state.
Mr. Ernest Arko, Inspector General of Police from 1974 to 1978, Minister of Interior, 1974 to 1978.
Catechist of the Ekuapem Presbytery, Samuel Hall, has this to say about the church, schools, and the IGP Ernest Arko of Ukropong Ekuapem.
It was in Ukropong that we had the first primary school, the first middle school, the first seminary, the first training college. These were all people, and the missionaries were been in training people and as well imparting the gospel. They believe with that background, they can be able to spread the gospel more. So education was very primary to them. So Ukropong is noted for a very, very rich history of culture and training. Talking about meticulous moral training.
Openyi Kwabena Amponsan Adey is a cousin to Mr. Ernest Arko. He's also a retired officer of Ghana's Foreign Service, whose duty post was London at the time Mr. Ernest Arko exited into exile. He says the deceased former IGP was mirror of several positive qualities, and his absence is sorely felt.
One thing I'm going to say, Africans, we don't read. Sir, yes, book biaba. No, Uncle Tom Mecano. Maybe intellectuals. Sebi, about China, autographical. Or spending so many minutes or hours. No can across the road, no on and a very difficult am I. Say it to my country Ghana for the type of people. But one thing I like a big deal. But Ghana for credit, you say. Only panic to why you can was. When you are done in the way, oh yeah, one year cry, yes. Why you no be brave? Be brave, pa Makana. Young local councillor, let's see Arko. Court. Arko. Osha, and go start the police station. But Otias and Yankada, guess what we are saying.
Mr. Kwesi Jirenchi, a nephew of Mr. Ernest Arko, sounded the appellations in the vein of the Importi clan in honor of the departed former IGP and Interior Minister, Mr. Ernest Arko.
Arko Obensa, apatra mo furu nipa chichibechi obu aguma. Akoko fufu a akoroma hye ne so. Ofi ekropon kokwaduam oboafo ne nekomafo wodan wontumi wodan tua odasi abio abo ne nipa ewu ya wosie wi korobo sekete na nanam korobo danchira. Oduma se korobo. Odum kasi asofo na nanam a motum kwanta nan su de wu abrade. Ya no ma mutwa nipa ti na mudi nipa aboje butu mu ahina so. Na mokoda abutitie mojam na mkosumsum fufu. Nkwoti so bomodan kana wate.
Reverend Bernardino Madlante was the funeral celebrant at a solemn church service for Mr. Ernest Arko held at the Barking Methodist Church in London. The event, which came 3 months after Mr. Arko's death, was attended by family and friends. Mr. Ernest Arko, who was one-time Inspector General of Police and the Commissioner for the Interior in Ghana, died in London after a short illness on the 16th of January 2021, just days away from his 98th birthday. He was a recipient of the Order of the Volta and Distinguished Service Order, both of which are highest national awards conferred by the government of Ghana.